Every day, they stand between safety and chaos. TSA agents, mothers, fathers, providers. But right now, over 1,500 families are hurting. Because funding has stalled, paychecks have stopped, and the people who protect our skies are struggling just to survive. Some can't afford gas to report for duty. Others are choosing between food and keeping the lights on. This isn't political. This is personal. While politicians argue, real families are paying the price. That's why Frontline Facts, in partnership with community leaders and people like you, is stepping up, not to debate, but to act, launching a relief campaign to support the very people who keep America safe every single day. Houston, we have a solution, because when they show up for us, we show up for them. Join the movement. Stand with our TSA families. Frontline Facts, turning awareness into action.
In a time of rising unrest, when borders dominate headlines and immigration policy shapes the future of our nation, the truth matters. From the front lines of law enforcement, national security, and public policy, this is Frontline Facts, where rhetoric is stripped away, where politics takes a back seat, and where facts, hard, documented facts, lead the conversation. As instability grows beyond our southern border, as communities feel the impact at home, we bring you informed voices. Attorneys, senior law enforcement leaders, policy experts, and professionals who understand the law, the protocols, and the consequences. This isn't opinion. This isn't spin. This is clarity in a time of confusion. This is Frontline Facts, and the conversation starts now.
Welcome to Frontline Facts with Louisa Deason, where we correct the rhetoric on immigration issues and public policy. In today's episode, we will dive into what has happened in the past 10 years regarding the cartel violence along the southern border, what are the types of drugs that are being smuggled into the United States, and what that means for the safety and the security of our communities. We will talk about the shift that's happened when you clamp down things on the southern border and how things now shift to the northern border. Our special guest today is Sheriff Roy Boyd from Goliad. He's out of Texas. We will have him on today to explain exactly what is happening with all of this big mess. Sheriff Roy Boyd, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
So, Sheriff Roy Boyd, explain a little bit to me what you've been seeing in the last, say, 10 years and what has changed so dramatically in the Goliad, Texas area. And give us a little bit of the background about your history and how you got started.
I'll tell you from as far as my career goes, I've been in law enforcement for, going on 33 years, a little over 32 now. So I started off with the Victoria Police Department and eventually I was work patrol, worked undercover narcotics, worked on some Homeland Security projects when they very first came out, helped with the formation of the Border Star program for the state of Texas under Governor Perry. Was tasked by his office to participate in some of those activities back long before anybody realized anything was going on. Eventually became the assistant chief of police, retired from there, became the chief deputy for Victoria County Sheriff's Office under T. Michael O'Connor, who's now the U.S. Marshal out of Houston. We worked a lot on transnational criminal activity, stood up our own task force there at the Sheriff's Office, had our interdiction unit, and pushed forward with Houston HIDA to form the Crossroads Task Force. Did a lot of work with the legislature out of the Victoria County Sheriff's Office. Retired from there, ran for sheriff in Goliad, told my wife we were going to be back home in a small town, be much more peaceful. I wouldn't have to fly ever again. That's one of the things I told her. She told me I was wrong. She was right. And then I wouldn't have to deal with politicians or give any more interviews ever again. And as you can see, once again, my wife was right. I was wrong. So I came into office here in Goliad in 2021. Funny thing is I got my truck. I got a brand new truck when I came into to be the sheriff. I got the lights on it, and the very next day, I made 2 traffic stops. In the second one, I got in a pursuit with a Camaro that ended up in a bailout that had 16 illegal aliens in a Camaro. And, from that point on in 2021, that was right after a week after Biden got sworn in as president. From that point on, we were in about 3 bailouts a week in Goliad County. We were overrun with activity. And so you ask about what's changed in the last 10 years. I will say that the presence, the command and control influence and the sheer presence of cartels, their contractors and their subcontractors has increased substantially. For us, it began to change a while back. Coming up through the crack epidemic, we had street gangs. Eventually, the prison gangs absorbed all the street gangs, set new rules for the kids on the streets that were in the gangs. And then from there, the cartels came in and relegated all the prison gangs like Mexican Mafia, Texas Syndicate, even eventually the bikers like the Hells Angels and Calaveras. Those guys are nothing but mere contractors for the cartels now. And so it's drastically changed how criminal activity takes place on the streets of South Texas.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because we've known for a while now, thank God that President Trump has now designated a lot of these organizations that are gangs as terrorist organizations because that's exactly what they are. I mean, starting out with MS-13, the Mara Salvatrucha, and they're beyond violent. But I have, worked for ICE before and seen a lot of the things that the guys use to investigate. And of course, I know for a fact that we had never seen the numbers of illegal aliens coming into the U.S. along the southern border that we saw during the entire Biden administration. That was just an absolute open border, catch and release type policy. And that really has shown its ugly colors or the true colors of what really has entered this country. And when you talk about cartels, now we're talking about there's terror cells embedded and working in conjunction with the cartels. And what are you seeing out of Goliad, and what is your perspective based on the last couple of years and what you're seeing now, in that connection between, the narcos and the terrorists working in conjunction with one another?
Well, you touch on something that I'll tell you most people either want to deny or never want to talk about, but it's the absolute truth. So there was a chief deputy under Sheriff Dwayne Jernigan in Val Verde County prior to Joe Frank being the sheriff down there, and that chief deputy was Terry Simons. And when Joe Frank won and Jernigan was out, Terry Simons ended up becoming the chief deputy for Team Michael for 4 years. And when Terry was down in Del Rio, he testified before Congress about Al-Qaeda training with the Mexican cartels just on the other side of the river. And he was right, and he had the evidence of that, but everybody wanted to, claim that it wasn't true. And so we see that today. You have technology that is coming out of the Ukrainian war that is showing up right there on the Mexican border. You're talking about, tethered drones. You're talking about, very high-tech stuff that's military-grade equipment. And the cartels, they don't have any rules to play by other than to win. And so they're very flexible in how they adapt their methodology. We've seen where some of the weapons that have been sold to Ukraine have wound up back in Mexico in the hands of the cartels. So they have connectivity. People need to realize, I mean, just the new generation Jalisco cartel, CJ&G, operates now in like 66 countries. These are worldwide multi-billion-dollar organizations. And so they network with China, they network with Russia, they network with Al-Qaeda, with the Taliban, they network with anybody, ISIS, anybody that they can network, because those organizations want to be in the United States. People want to either get here because they want to be here, or they want to get here because they want to do us harm. And the cartels, they're very agnostic. They don't care about the product. They don't care about your your motives, they just want to make money. And so that's exactly what they do.
Well, they're ruthless, for
Anybody.
one thing. But you're right on the money. And I posed a question to a friend of mine who has now retired from the FBI that has worked cartels most of his career. But one of the scarier things is that we now see a very, very large Iranian embassy in Mexico. And that's, that there's transiting through the border. And if everybody who does not believe that Hamas is here or that is staged in Mexico ready to enter, they're just waiting for the perfect time.
Well,
Right. One of the things that's scary is you start clamping and you see this violent gang out of Guadalajara, or the cartel that, what did you say they operate? Well, I think they operate and control 31 of the 36 states in Mexico.
yeah, but they're also in 66 countries currently as of the
That's
last count.
that's alarming.
But also you have to realize this, ISIS's own internal documents recently revealed that their own inventory shows that they have more than 2,500 ISIS terrorists here in the United States waiting for orders to strike that are here illegally. Our own government, our intel services estimate that somewhere around 18,000 known terrorists are illegally here in the United States right now.
What did you say? What was that number?
18,000.
Oh my gosh.
And if you go and look at the information that Sarah Adams puts out, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she was our targeter for the CIA during the War on Terror. She was one of the chief targeters. She's recently come out with some of those numbers, and these are numbers that are coming out as a result of testimony with Congress and with other internal government entities. That more than 18,000 is what our own government now estimates are here in the country that are known terrorists waiting.
Well, and so much for the person who says these were just Mexican nationals coming in looking for work. And I'm thinking, we had over 158 different nationalities come in under the Biden administration, and the majority were not friendly to the U.S. They were either from cartels, or they were from sponsored states and countries that support terrorism or fund terrorism. And so this is one of the reasons why I think we're very thankful that President Trump has clamped down on the visa access for many of those countries by closing down the access to visas in 175 different countries. But it's almost as if we learned nothing after 9/11. Everybody was worried about hurting people's feelings. And it's like, you don't negotiate with terrorists.
No, no, you can't negotiate with terrorists. And the other thing that our government needs to realize is Mexico views the United States as an enemy. And if you go back in history, the government of Mexico, they sided with the Kaiser, they sided with Hitler, they sided with Stalin, they side with the Chinese and the Russians currently. And they side with our adversaries because, the president of Mexico, the anthem she has selected for all of her gatherings talk about how they are going to eliminate the Anglos in the North American continent and take the United States back. And so, we need to understand, in Mexico, if you're in the military and you're going to become a non-commissioned officer, when you go to school, they teach in their school for all their officers for the military that the United States stole Mexico from them and that we are their eternal enemy and we must eventually be conquered and can never be dealt with. And so our government needs to understand that that is not some just, the poor peasant with the burro next door. It is a pro-communist, anti-American government. That doesn't mean all the people down there are. There's a lot of good people in Mexico, but their government has traditionally been an extremely anti-American regime. And even when they pretend to help us out, in reality, they're only doing things for their own benefit. They're taking our money and they're not necessarily even using it for what we've asked them to do with it.
Well, and you think about, a lot of people will say, well, that Mexican American that's here, or, that person has been here illegally 20 years. I mean, they really didn't commit a crime. And you and I both know that is a crime. So it's not just the crime that they entered illegally. That's a Title 8, Section 1325 violation. But then if they obtained a fake document to work, and then along the fact that they've been here in excess of 180 days illegally and working in that capacity for that long, that's like 4 or 5 dings to the record. And if they didn't have a chance to adjust their status in 20 years, then that means that they didn't merit a benefit. And so I'm sorry, but we can't play to the heartstrings of every person who's, a fearmonger saying that we're separating families. Let's start with the family separated itself when they first entered illegally.
No, you're absolutely right, and there's other factors, what I have found in my years is that most of the men who are here illegally and work construction and work, they have 2 families. They have their wife and kids in Mexico, and then they have a girlfriend and kids in the United States, and so they work off the books, so they are making money without paying taxes. That's a burden to the other taxpayers. But they also send their remittances back to Mexico for their wife and their kids, and so what they do is that money gets wire transferred, whether it be Western Union, Walmart, or any other entity that wire transfers money, uh, then that money is now removed out of our circulation, and it is moved to Mexico. So what is our when our money starts going overseas, we have to print more money in order to have the cash flow in the United States. So what does that do to the average American? That devalues their dollar. So all these tens of millions of illegals in the country who are sending money overseas, they are actually stealing from us, not just by not paying taxes, but by causing the inflation that then causes our groceries and everything else to go up. But most people don't understand that, and
Well,
that's how it functions.
what were the figures? I think by the end of the 4 years, it looked like 850 million per year had been spent just in the state of Texas alone on minors. I mean,
So
the numbers are staggering. And of course, we didn't just let in 12 million illegal aliens under the Biden administration. We let in a lot more than that. And from countries that were not friendly to the United States. Now, let me take a pivot. We're going to have to take a break in about 10 minutes. But let's pivot into what kind of drugs are you seeing coming in through the southern border? Because I know that when you start clamping down areas, obviously there's going to be territorial fighting, which is what we're seeing with some of the violence in Mexico. But the other thing is, it's like illegal aliens. When you start clamping down along the southern border, you're going to get different territories and different turfs and bosses in those areas fighting against each other for that territory. So, what are you seeing today that maybe 10 years ago or 5 or 6 years ago we didn't see?
Well, I think a lot of it is a replay. As the Bible says, there's nothing new under the sun. It all is just fluid. You have to look at the cartel as if they're water. They go in the path of least resistance because their ultimate goal is to make money. Now, there's individuals that they want the power and the money, so they're gonna fight. Currently, I believe there's active cartel violence going on between cartels in 10 different states in Mexico. So I know that the administration is disrupting things in Mexico, but it's not stopping anything from actually taking place. All it's doing is causing them to fight down deep inside of Mexico. But the product is still coming across. We still have cocaine. Cocaine is really picked up. The fentanyl coming from the southern border has pretty much not completely been eliminated, but it's dried up considerably. And that the reason is the intelligence that we're getting says that the Sinaloa cartel has made a business decision not to import massive amounts of fentanyl because they're afraid of a kinetic strike on their family members from the Trump administration. So what they've done is now they're producing the fentanyl in Canada and bringing it in through the northern border is what they're doing.
Well, and we've also seen a lot of illegal aliens from special interest countries coming in into the northern border. But you said something one night that really sparked some interest as far as, I heard last night as well that some of the fentanyl is now being diluted. You're right in your assessment, and I respect that because I heard it from more than one source. That the cocaine is becoming more and more popular once again, and now that they're diluting, but they're mixing things together now that are far more dangerous. Now we're talking about synthetic marijuana that they're saying that's the potential for also causing a lot of brain damage and a lot of things to our youth. And that it's funny how the U.S. is blamed for the consumption, but we have to put a stop to it.
Yeah, the point about the US being blamed for consumption, you're right. We have people within our own country that blame that. What they don't realize is when the cartel comes out with a new product, because I mean, they're just like any company, they are constantly trying to reinvent and get an advantage. They come out with a new product, they actually test that product. They'll bring it to the United States, and they'll hand it out for free at parties and get people addicted to it. That's how they brought cocaine in. That's how they brought a lot of other drugs in. Fentanyl, they bring it in, they hand it out like it's candy at Halloween, And then when people just want it, then now the demand is created, and now they can feel the demand they created themselves. So it's not as simple as a lot of the left wants to say, well, it's our fault. No, it's not our fault. It's our fault for allowing this business to take place, but it's not our fault for the demand. The cartel has created that demand artificially to a very smart business model that they've developed.
Well, and they're very well organized. They're criminal enterprises that are embedded in and in charge of so many other things. The child trafficking, the smuggling of aliens, the gun running. I mean, I've always said the money and the guns run south, and the aliens and the drugs go north.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And you also have guns running north as well, because you have those terrorist organizations you talked about a while ago are actually importing their guns into Mexico, and the cartel is helping getting military grade weapons across north for the terrorists.
The Mexican nationals can't walk around with guns, so they're outnumbered all the way around. I mean, for Mexican federales, they're outnumbered with the kinds of weapons that the cartels are have in their possession.
Yeah, and for the most part, the Mexican government and the cartels are one and the same. We've seen that historically. They work in a collaborative, and now they're so intertwined, it's hard to tell one from another in many different areas.
It's almost like trust no one.
That's it. That's exactly
Trust
what
no
it
one.
is.
Okay, so let's move into let's briefly talk about some of the things that you've seen. I mean, these are well-knit criminal enterprises. They've got people that are, from A to Z. They've got the scouts, they've got the mules, describe that to the person who's not familiar with how all these organizations are so well organized that they have people in place in every facet of their organization.
So in order to do that, you have to kind of back up into Mexico. So in Mexico, the government runs what they call the plaza system. And what that really is the government leases territory to the cartels on a month-to-month basis. And so if I run a cartel, they'll come in, or say I have the Gulf, they'll tell me, okay, you can run this geographic territory, you can move this many tons of marijuana, this many kilos of cocaine, this much meth, this many illegals. They'll lay out the product and say, you can do this much illicit business in this geographic territory for X amount of dollars a month. And they've been doing this forever. If anybody's, listening has ever watched Narcos Mexico, they'll remember Pablo Acosta is the guy who dated Mimi, the senator's daughter, or something like that. And they come in and kill him, shoot him from the helicopter, and kill him in the plaza in Oanagua. Well,
I've seen that whole series.
yeah, Pablo Acosta was a real man. And Pablo Acosta ran the plaza. And in the 70s and 80s, he paid the Mexican government. He went to the government radio station every month and provided them with $100,000 cash, and a cut went all the way to the Mexican president every month. And the government came in and killed him because he wouldn't deal with the Colombians, and the Colombians were willing to bring in the cocaine, which he would not deal with. And the Colombians, they were willing to pay $1 million a month for the same plaza. So the government killed him to take the plaza. So now you fast forward, the cartel has now replicated that plaza system right here in the United States. And we've seen that firsthand. We saw it in Victoria. We were buying pure cocaine off the brick. I mean, they were shaving it off of a solid brick of cocaine.
Wow.
But the problem was it was Houston Mexican Mafia. Well, Victoria is not in the Houston Mexican Mafia District. We're in the Corpus Mexican Mafia District. So in our investigation, we started trying to figure out, why is Houston Mexican Mafia here, not Corpus? What we found out was the Gulf Cartel had seized control of our area and had created authorized distributors of pure cocaine. And so they came in, and the Houston Mexican Mafia won the bid for the distribution rights of pure cocaine in Victoria and the surrounding counties. Well, the cartel is so thorough, they actually went out and bought cocaine off the streets from buyers in the early stages and tested it for purity. And if you were selling pure cocaine and you were not an authorized agent of an authorized distributor, then what they did was they came to you and said, hey, you're selling pure cocaine, you're not an authorized distributor, you have to dilute your product at least 50% with something like a powdered baby laxative or something.
Ouch.
And so most of the drug dealers got in line because it's the cartel showing up. And so but some of them didn't. And we had about 10 street level drug dealers disappear because the cartel, you don't ever find a body. The cartel just makes you.
No, that's right. That's right.
And we had about 10 of them disappear down in our area. So the cartel now controls geographic territories throughout the United States. And that case there was probably about 8, 9 years ago. And to show you how far reaching the cartel is, we had that case in our special crimes unit. Our own county IT got paid off to break into our computer system. They broke in twice and exported all the details of our case through a web-based email out to an unknown recipient. And we were able to find that they sent it out, but we were not able to find who received it. But they broke in, and that's because the cartel, I mean, they're omnipresent at this point. They're everywhere. They have representatives in every small community throughout the country now. So because you have your cartels, you have contractors, you have subcontractors, you have affiliate organizations and otherwise legitimate businesses. It's like a spider web of logistics that the cartel has set up across the United States, and it's phenomenal. These guys are business geniuses. They just don't have a moral compass.
Yes, exactly. And that's pretty much describing how these organizations that smuggle people into the country operate as well. I mean, you've got people that recruit abroad. You've got people that house them, that feed them. They bring them in. You know, I've always said Houston is not only the mecca for the drug trafficking, but it's also the biggest mecca for the child trafficking. You know, we see trafficking because, number one, once you get through the southern border, you're in the fourth largest city in the U.S., and the disbursement from here to other states with the transit provided is amazing.
Yeah, Houston is a distribution hub for all cartel activity for the eastern half of the United States.
That's scary. Listen, we're going to have to cut over to a commercial break real quick because we do have sponsors we want to highlight. Thank you for waiting.
When it comes to motorcycles, there's talk, and then there's real experience. At Mad Dog Moto, it's hands-on. Street bikes, dirt bikes, high-revving machines, and hard-ridden trail beasts. From routine maintenance and diagnostics to engine builds, clutch replacements, suspension upgrades, and performance tuning. Every bolt matters. Carbureted or fuel injected, electrical troubleshooting, precision dial-ins. No shortcuts, no guesswork. Because performance means nothing without reliability, and power means nothing without safety. This isn't just wrenching, it's craftsmanship. It's knowing how a bike should feel when it's tuned right, how it should respond when you twist the throttle, and how it should hold up when you push it hard. At Mad Dog Moto, every machine gets treated like it's our own. Ready to ride stronger? Call us today at 346-404-3901. I repeat, 346-404-3901. Or email us at maddogmotoservice@gmail.com. Mad Dog Moto, dependable, powerful, ready to up your ride. Do you have bad credit? Have you tried fixing it yourself and just get frustrated and feel like you will never be able to get to your goals? If credit scores determine what you buy and at what cost, then does it not make more sense to actually hire the big dogs to save you money long term? At Deason's Credit Restoration Services, they have a group of certified and licensed credit attorneys, also versed in consumer protection laws, who do all the work on your behalf to permanently eliminate those negative and derogatory items affecting your credit scores. As we say, there are two things we cannot help you cheat your way out of, and that is death and paying taxes. But restoring your credit will change your life. please contact Deason's Credit Restoration Services by calling 832-244-2488. Don't wait. Rates are not going down, but your credit scores will go up.
Well, we are back. I am Louisa Beeson. I am your host for Frontline Facts. We are correcting the rhetoric, and we're coming back to our guest today. We're now returning to Frontline Facts with our special guest, Roy Boyd, Sheriff. We took a small break, and we were talking about the fact that Houston is a hub for a lot of the activity going on. It's not just for the cartels, but also for the sex trafficking. Describe some of the cases that you've worked on that highlight that kind of a investigation and what kind of success you've had in putting a dent in some of these larger, more heinous cases that we've seen.
Yeah, we came across in 2021 an organization called Tateca, and uh, at the time we couldn't grasp the totality of it. But what they were is they were a contractor for moving illegal aliens from the border region into Houston. And according to the Department of Homeland Security, they were bringing 100,000 illegal aliens a year. This is one subcontractor out of thousands of them, and they were bringing 100,000 people a year through our county going to Houston. So when we discovered this, naturally, the first thing I did was I reached out to Stephen Greenwell from HSI, and we sat down and started looking at everything we had. And HSI came out, and we would go to stash sites, cartel stash sites. We'd pick through their trash. We'd load up trailer loads of trash, go to the dump, and basically sit on the end of the trailer. Agent Dutra and I sat there for hours just going through every single piece of trash, piecing together where they bought their auto parts, where they got their pizza, where they refueled. We mapped it all out pretty extensively. And thanks to our partnership with HSI, they did a heck of a job. But what we found out was this organization that we kept encountering, it was pretty huge, but they were also pretty brutal. They would mostly smoke methamphetamine and run 20 hours a day back and forth, get as many loads as they could get of people into Houston, and get them up there. And during this investigation, we found what turned out to be the largest cartel stash site in the interior of the United States of America, right here in Goliad County, and that was only in my third month in office. And they were stripping stolen trucks. They were stashing illegals. They were hiding out from law enforcement. But one of the key players in this organization was a guy that went by the name of Palooza. And I don't know how many times we chased him, other agencies chased him. This guy missed his call, and he should have been a NASCAR driver or something, because he was a driving fool. And we wrecked him out, I can't tell you how many times. And then he'd run 5 miles through the brush, but their network was so sophisticated, no matter where he ran or where we chased him, he always had somebody on a different road ready to pick him up the second he got through the brush.
Wow.
I mean, they were very, very well sophisticated in their methodology. But thanks to the hard work of Dutra and Greenwell, we eventually got that organization dismantled, and it took us a little over 2 years to do it. But when we did, we knew that Palooza had sexually assaulted one of his own female scout drivers, and we were able to interview her. And from there, another investigation started looking into this problem. And what we found is this smuggler admitted in federal court that he had sexually assaulted, it's like 224 or 226 of the women he had smuggled into the United States. And in court, he said, "Well, I've raped more, but I just can't remember them all."
What a demented. That's demonic.
Yeah,
I mean, these
it's not
people,
that.
obviously, these people have a very little regard for the value of a human life. It's a commodity that they push through, and it just pays them money.
In one of the cases in a neighboring county for me, he actually put 19 illegal aliens on their knees, poked them each in the head with his Glock pistol, and told them if they looked away, he'd kill them. And he forced them to watch as he sexually assaulted his female scout driver right in front of him. I mean, these are the kind of people that we have coming in this country.
Yeah, and now we put the mix on top of that with all the Islamic movement going on and the fact that we have terrorists. When I talk about um, people that say, well, this is a humanitarian crisis with what we saw under the Biden administration, I said, no, it was something created by design. He knew exactly what he was doing, and whether he did or not at the end, it doesn't matter. It's every person who has voted against protecting citizens in this country and taking charge and protecting criminal illegal aliens first is just it's mind-blowing to think that somebody has that kind of mentality that they would not protect citizens in this country.
Yeah. And it is, I will tell you, it is a humanitarian crisis, but not the way that the left paints it. Because the people that come into this country are in indentured servitude, they're slaves. Uh, we conducted an investigation in Victoria on football in Victoria and another one in Rockport where they were forcing the women. It was a place where you would go to get sexual favors at this football. And in the one in Victoria, they held the girls in a back room, and their bathroom only consisted of a toilet and a sink. These girls were prostitutes, and they didn't even have a place to take a bath, and they weren't allowed to leave. But the place down in Rockport, they had a house where they kept the sex slaves, about 2 blocks from the parlor. And when I conducted the raid on the house, I went through a backpack, and in that backpack, I found a letter that starts off, and it's a letter from a guy to his sister. And it says, "Dear sister," it says, "here in the USA, we sometimes have something called a slave boy or a slave girl." And it goes on to articulate that when you come to the United States, it takes 8 to 13 years to buy your freedom here in the United States from your masters. And I will tell you that in law enforcement, I've seen that firsthand, but even worse, I've seen when these people get close to paying off their debt, that their masters sell them and the cycle starts all over again. I saw one group, this happened to them 3 different times.
Well, and they run through a circuit. We saw that when I was the spokesperson for ICE specifically. We worked a case where the Thai females were being told they'd become models and movie stars and things of that nature. And they come in, they're paying $80,000 and they can't possibly pay that off. And of course, they take all their documents and they're slaves. This is indentured servitude. And they're forced to sleep with men, whether they're medically seen or not. It didn't matter to them. And some of these women were so sick by the time we finally discovered the different brothels throughout the city where they were being housed. And then you know as well as I know, the moment that brothel is discovered or that massage parlor is discovered, the first thing they do is shut down. They move to a different location under a different name.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's just what the horror these poor women and these poor girls and boys included live through. It's unfathomable. So
And when you put the numbers of the people that came across just under the Biden administration, it's phenomenal. I will tell you that I had a Border Patrol station chief tell me that in 2021 alone, they estimated somewhere between 18 and 25 million came across illegally that one year. I was out in Mar-a-Lago in early 2024. My wife and I were invited to an event out there. And so we went out there and met with many of the people who ended up in the administration. And the number that they talked about privately was 40 to 60 million came across during the Biden term.
I believe that. I've heard the same numbers.
Yeah, and I believe it just by the sheer volume that we saw in a small rural county of 7,000 people. It's a phenomenal number of people in this country right now that are here illegally.
Well, and many of them are not here just to work. Many here now are here to do us harm. They're just waiting, sitting and waiting. What is some of the scariest things that you have seen throughout your last couple of years as sheriff?
Number one, it was just the sheer volume and the lack of humanity on top of it that was taking place. These folks that we were dealing with, most of the smugglers were actually illegal aliens themselves. And the brutality that these people had, dumping people, if somebody got sick or died, they just dumped them on the side of the road. We would find the bodies. We would find the video on the phones of them in the stash houses in South Texas. And it was just the living conditions were just absolutely
Oh,
atrocious.
they're horrific. Yeah.
And the way that they would assault the women, we actually found videos of from girls that were being forced to pay through sex for their transport. And so you'd find videos on phones of these guys just having sex with all these different women that they were transporting. And of course, these girls have no choice. They're being sexually assaulted,
Yeah.
and you're being held captive. One of the things that, Greenwell and I came across back when, we were doing investigations together is, uh, he had some investigations down in the valley and just dealing with the sicarios. People don't realize that there are people that come into this country or even live here, were born here, but work for the cartels. And, because their loyalty is not with the United States, it's with Mexico. And they might be a pipe fitter during the day, but they'll kill people at night or on the weekends for extra money. And the cartel has all these, disconnected, affiliates all over the United States. I know that, when Greenwell was still at Homeland Security, we had one case where they sent a Sicario, to Atlanta, and he killed a handful of people, and on the way back, the driver on the car bringing him back to Mexico was so whacked out on meth, he made him stop out in the country on the border of Jackson and Lavaca counties, and they abandoned the vehicle, went in the brush. Well, the deputies showed up, and the deputies started arguing about whose county they were in. They both drove off and just left it there. And later on, the Edna Police Department apprehended the driver at a gas station, and then coming to find out, we had this, Sicario roaming around the brush over in their county.
Oh
Is
my
those
gosh.
things are just, those are things that Americans shouldn't have to deal with. But unfortunately, our government, like you said, our government became the last logistical leg of the cartels and the financier of the cartels and the NGOs. And so it was just disgusting to see what all was going on and how they were fighting against us. And I've got to give it to Border Patrol, the men and women of Border Patrol.
I love the Border Patrol.
No matter what the Biden administration threw in their way, they found a way to help us, and then the Biden administration would find out they were helping us and then throw another obstacle in their way, and then they'd find another way to help us. And the men and women of Border Patrol never stopped trying. You know
Well, they were taken off completely from the front lines, and they started changing diapers and feeding babies. And the problem was, a lot of them were forced to either, they had a deadline. A lot of the attrition was enormous because of many of them didn't want to take the vaccine because you're dealing with people, and yet everybody coming through the border in some way, shape, or form was COVID positive. So, I mean, just the insanity of pulling them off the front lines. They literally are our first line of defense. And then everything else that comes in after that is deal with the surrounding entities and the sheriff's offices and the police chiefs that cooperate. And you have to have cooperation. I look at some of the things going on in Houston. I guess we're very blessed we don't have a Minnesota going on here because we do have great relations with Houston Police Department and the Harris County Sheriff's Deputy Division. But these ICE detainers, and people think, well, they shouldn't be doing that, but we need cooperation. It's no different than a murderer in one state being caught by someone in a different police department, and they might look up the name and information and see there's a bolo for Houston, and who would not pick up the phone and cooperate with that police force looking for this guy? So it's almost insanity to think nobody wants to cooperate with ICE.
Yeah. Yeah, we all have to work together, and we face that. We even face that at the state level. Under the previous director of DPS, they would try to interfere with our proactive task force operations. Find out we were working somewhere and either flood it with troopers or park empty black and whites up and down the highway along key smuggling routes and just leave them there. So we always face those obstacles as we move forward. But fortunately, under the new director, DPS, we don't have that problem because he's like you're talking about. He is a man who wishes for all of us to work together, and you can tell it's a totally different mentality at Texas Department of Public Safety under Colonel Freeman Martin than it had been in the past.
Well, and that's kudos to, everybody working in conjunction. I can't imagine not working collaboratively. But let's talk a little bit about some of the things that obviously cartels and drug activity and terrorism, they all bring something to the community, which is always bad. And that is, we've seen a rise in crime. You've seen it in Goliad County. We've seen it here in Houston. And yet people still continue to vote the same people in that are making the bad decisions and that are releasing these criminals. I know in Houston we had a case many years ago called the O'Donnell case, and it was indigent people being arrested, and they didn't have the money for bond, so it was a big bail bondsman issue. And what happened is the state won the case. So what happened is now these misdemeanors have turned into felons that are now being released and cases dismissed because of the O'Donnell case. And that just raises it's a whole bigger picture and a bigger problem when you're talking about the safety of communities. It brings crime.
It does. Without consequences, people are going to continue to take bad actions. You have to, you have to have consequences, but not only that, if a community is gonna be safe, it really their law enforcement needs a reputation for being tough on crime. As the sheriff, I know when we first started out with all these pursuits and bailouts, I sat down and I was like, "How do I get the word out? How do I keep these people out of my county?" Because, I mean, within the first 6 months, we discovered 16 cartel stash sites, uh, on lands here in Goliad County. I mean, it's a rural county. People were scared to stay at home at night, when their spouse was gone. And so I thought, the cartel, they hang those sheets over the overpasses when they hang the bodies and they'll put the message on them. So I thought, how about I do something like that? So I went and I had signs made and they said, attention, there were 4x8 signs, just like a political sign would be, corrugated plastic. And it said, attention, traffickers of humans and drugs, turn around and go around. Do not enter Goliad County or I will hunt you down and throw you in jail. And I put them out in the ditches on the roads coming in from the south. And I get a call from Homeland Security one day and they said, because it had made the news and there's a picture of me standing next to one of the signs. And they said, hey, the cartel's passing your picture around down in Mexico. One of our informants is talking about you. I said, oh, really? I said, what do they say? He said, well, they said you're a loco gringo. And because you're crazy, you might shoot them. So they've told all their liaisons to their driver contractors to tell the drivers to drive around if they see one of those signs. Don't go down that road because you might kill them. That's so perfect. That's exactly what I want them to think.
That was the message I wanted and had intended to deliver.
And then I had to go to war with TxDOT because TxDOT kept taking the signs up. And then I'd have to go get them from TxDOT, put them back out. And I finally talked to regional engineer, and he flat out told me he sided with Mexico, not Texas, and that I couldn't have my sign. So I kept putting them out, and eventually I didn't have to put them out because the word was out and they were driving around us because we had developed a reputation. And that's what Houston PD had back in the 70s and 80s. They had a reputation. You didn't mess around in Houston. But now it's the opposite. Houston is a safe haven, and they know it because there's no prosecution there.
Well, and part of that is because of that O'Donnell case, and that has absolutely wreaked havoc on the fact that felons are being released.
And the field guys are going out and doing what they can do. You've got the tag up there. You've got the HIDTA guys. You've got a bunch of different strike forces. And the men and women are going out and conducting the enforcement the best they can do. But, everybody's getting released the same day you bring them in or the next day. And so, it's like running uphill in a mudslide is what it turns into. And so it's frustrating, but they keep going after it and they keep going after it. But the problem is they're in a sanctuary city, which kind of, I don't know, makes me wonder about the methodology that we have from the federal government of pumping all the money into sanctuary jurisdictions and instead of out into the smaller areas where there's more likely to be prosecution, because most of our federal law enforcement money goes right into the major urban centers where there will never be prosecution. And to be quite honest with you, most of the federal agents that I've worked with, it's like they're scared to get off the concrete. They won't come out in the field. In the rural areas, there's some that will, but there are a lot who do not want to come out. And
the insanity itself of just the mere fact that we have voted people in, and not myself, but I mean, obviously people need to do due diligence in how they vote locally. It really truly matters how law enforcement protects communities and everything else. We cannot continue to afford to have very violent criminals, specifically criminal aliens, released into the communities in this revolving door. I know that, a lot of the guys that I have worked with in the past do a very good job of that reentry after deportation prosecutions, and now it carries a higher sentence. We're seeing into between 10 to 20 years as a sentence after that reentry after deportation because it stops this insanity of somebody being deported 17 times. It's like, how can somebody like this fall through the cracks? It's not someone falling through the cracks. Somebody's doing something deliberately.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and you struck on something that's very important, and that's, that's our local governance, voting for the right people. Because I will tell you that, we have a pretty robust task force that we set up through the Operation Lone Star Task Force that the governor has, helped us, through prioritizing some of our funding for this effort. But, uh, you know, I honestly believe that there might be 10% of the sheriffs and chiefs of police that actually want to go out and be proactive. So many of them are political. That case that I told you about with the guy who sexually assaulted his scout driver, it's in a neighboring county. It's about a mile outside of my county. And I went to the sheriff over there and I told him, hey, we found this scene. It's a crime scene. This is what he did. We've got this federal case. And he asked me, he goes, I explained to him everything that we knew. He looked at me and said, where's it at? And I told him the name of the road. He shrugged his shoulders, says, not surprised, turned around, walked off. No interest in investigating it or creating an offense. Doesn't care. This is the same sheriff who told me, don't be telling people about all this stuff because we don't need them calling us and bothering us.
Oh, it's a bother. National security to bother. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I got one guy who used to be a sheriff that's now a state rep, and he had the exact same mentality. It was, don't be telling people all this stuff. We're going to worry them over this and they're going to be calling. And I'm like, well, that's not the right way to look at it. We're the servants of these people. And we're supposed to help provide them with the information that they need to be safe. And we're supposed to take the actions that are necessary to keep them safe to the best of our ability. But unfortunately, I will tell you, I honestly don't think that we have trained our people in the proper mindset to fight an asymmetrical battle that we are currently fighting. Most law enforcement are recruited and selected and trained to be linear thinkers. And that is not how we're going to be victorious and keep our people safe.
Well, you've nailed every single question that I had. I commend you for all your hard work. I know I've known you for several years, and I know you through several sources that continue to work with us, and just that I worked with in the past. And your information needs to get out. And people need to wake up and understand it's no longer living under this rock and this bubble that nothing bad's happening in my backyard. It's happening. You're just not opening up your eyes.
If you don't mind, I'll say that, most people, they see, like you talked about the humanitarian thing. They don't connect the presence of illegal aliens to the cartel. And so you have to look at the cartel as a global business with logistical requirements. And every illegal alien in this country is obligated to be at the beck and call of the cartel at any time while they're here. And if you think they can just move to another town and disappear, they can't.
No, they can't.
No,
You're
because
absolutely right.
the cartel and the Mexican government share the exact same intelligence service and all the data. The cartel has kept track of everybody who has come across. And we arrested a guy one day and he was an illegal alien. I asked him, I said, what are you here for? Why are you doing this? This was stupid. This got you caught. His response was, if I don't do what they tell me, they'll make my little sister a prostitute back in Mexico, and I can't have them doing that to my little sister.
Well, and that's the kind of stuff that people need to be made aware of. We talk about cases like we did a big operation at the Houston airport many, many years ago under INS, and it was the HIDA badges or the special badges to secure areas on the aircraft. Well, if you're an illegal alien, you're subject to a terrorist coming to you and saying, I'll kill your family if you don't do this, and then I'll kill you, but you need to put this bomb under seat number 12A.
Yeah.
And they don't realize it. They're like, that's preposterous. That's crazy. No, it's happening. It's happening today. It's happening.
It is. And the only way to take the cartel's presence out of the United States, because that's what needs to be happening. Because the federal government, I understand, they have a lot of balls in the air. They're doing some stuff in Mexico. They're doing stuff overseas. But we have to defund cartel operations inside the United States of America. And the only way to do that is to deny them the logistical capacity to conduct their business at a level which is profitable. And you can only do that if you deport the illegal aliens in this country. Because as long as the illegal aliens are here, the cartel is here. And the cartel brings quiet violence. They don't kill you out on the street in front of everybody. You just disappear. And thousands of people disappear a year just along the border area alone, that most of them never get reported out of fear their families have. And so we have to go about systematically doing this. And I will tell you that unfortunately the administration is not happening right now, and that's because of the influence of the political class and the bureaucrats and some of the people that even Trump has appointed who are internally fighting against it. And some of the agencies, in 2024, I was contacted by a former member of the first Trump administration and was asked to write the National Border Security Plan for the administration ahead of the election. And so we wound up putting together a team of 90 people, and we did that. And we presented it to Tom Homan. I've had countless meetings with Department of Homeland Security and federal bureaucrats and Congress and them about, these congressional groups about this plan. And had the administration actually followed it in chronological order, we'd be much further ahead right now than we are. But the problem is there's too many people in the government who do not wish for the Trump administration to succeed. I mean, you've heard of the federal task force that
Yes.
they put, so that came out of the plan. I wrote that part of the plan. The problem is, to be quite honest with you, is the biggest opponent to it's been the FBI. The FBI did not want Homeland Security to be in charge of it, and they have fought that thing tooth and nail, and they actually recruited the major county sheriffs and major city chiefs of police to go to the White House to fight against it. And they told them, well, if we do this, you might lose some of your funding for your other programs. My question is this: we've been dumping billions of dollars into the urban areas for the last couple of decades to fight crime. Tell me which urban area is better now than it was before we dumped those billions of dollars. We have to make changes. We have to adapt. I think it was it Winston Churchill said, a man who never changes his mind never changes anything. We have to be willing to adapt because things aren't the same now as they were when I was a young.
You don't adapt, you die.
Exactly. And so we have to get past all this territorial squabbling, and we have to go and do what's best for the American people, not for ourselves or our pocketbook or our career or, how people are going, what they're going to read at our funeral. So,
Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of this episode. I want to thank you absolutely for carving out time from your busy, busy schedule to speak to us. I want to thank our sponsors for today's segment. And again, we've come to the conclusion of another Frontline Facts with Louisa Deason. I am your host. Thank you very much, Shira.
thank you. God bless you and your listeners.